Shila Gurudev ki jai. Nityal Vishnu Vishnupad Ashatara Shatashmad Shila Bhakti-vedanta Vaman Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Nityal Vishnu Vishnupad Ashatara Shatashmad Shila Bhakti-vedanta Swami Maharaj Shila Prabhupada ki jai. Nityal Vishnu Vishnupad Ashatara Shatashmad Shila Bhakti-Gyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Nityal Vishnu Vishnupad Ashatara Shatashmad Shila Bhakti-siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada ki jai. Nityal Pṛthu Mahārāja Shila Gokṣaras Babaji Maharaj ki jai. Nityal Pṛthu Shila Satchidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur ki jai. Nityal Pṛthu Vaishnav Sarvabhauma Shila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj ki jai. Shri Rupa Gaurya Guru Varga ki jai. Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopal Patadasha Raghunath Shara Gosai Prabhu ki jai. Shri Sarup Damodara Rai Ramanandari Shri Gopal Shada Vrinda ki jai. Nama Chai Shila Haridas Thakur ki jai. प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासरी गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। श्री क्षेत्र मंडल गौर मंडल व्रज मंडल मथुरा वृंदावन धाम की जय। सर्व अभिष्ट प्रदत्त गिरिराज महाराज की जय। श्री राधा कुंड श्यामा कुंड की जय। श्री मुन देवी गंगा देवी की जय। श्री तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी की जय। श्री भक्ति देवी की जय। श्री पूर्णमासी योग माया की जय। श्री गोपेश्वर महादेव की जय। श्री हरि नाम संकीर्तन की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। समागत गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। Oh, what's today? Is today? One second, let me just look at my calendar. I think today might be Janava Devi's. Yes. Shri Sita Devi ki jai. Tatiya Shubha Abhirabhav Titi ki jai. Shri Janava Devi ki jai. Tatiya Shubha Abhirabhav Titi ki jai. श्री मधु पंडित की जय। तृतीय शुभ तिरुभाव तिथि की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। समागत गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। श्री निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल। Dandavad pranams of Seshwari Mataji and Madhavi Didi. Dandavad pranams. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Radhikaya Priyatmane Shri Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Narayana Namine. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Śrīmate Bhakti-vedanta Swaminiti Namine. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratishe Namaha. Guruve Gaurachandraya Radhikaya Tadalaye Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tarabhaktaya Namo Namaha. Yam pravrajantam anupetam apeta-krityam dvaipayano virahakatara ajuhava putreti tanmayataya taravobhinedu stang sarvabhuta hridaya munimanatosmi narayanam namaskritya narang chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jaya mudirayet. Shrinvatang swakata Krishna punya shravana kirtana hridantasto yabhadrani vidhunoti suhritsatam nashta prayeshvabhudreshu nityam bhagavat sevaya bhagavatuttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtaki tavaivasmi najivami tvaya vina iti vigyaya radhe tvam nayamam charanantikam bhaktya vihina aparada lakshay kshiptashtakamaddhitarangamadhe kripa maitam sharanam prapanna vrinde namaste charanarvindam. Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Dandavat pranams Rup Manjari, Dandavat pranams Janaran Prabhu, Hari Bol. So Pṛthu Mahārāja is meeting with the four Kumāras, continuing from chapter 22. Oops. This is a long chapter, but today we will finally finish it. So let's just go through it. When the citizens were praising Pṛthu Mahārāja, the four Kumāras who were as bright as the sun arrived there. Seeing their effulgence, Pṛthu and others could recognize who they were as they descended from the sky. Thus the king and the citizens immediately got up to receive them, with eagerness of a conditioned soul attracted to sense objects. Pṛthu, with shoulders lowered in humility, offered them seats, worshipped them according to the scriptures, washed their feet, and sprinkled that water over his hair. Thus he showed how to receive a saint. With respect and restraint, Pṛthu then began speaking with the four Kumāras, who were seated on the golden throne. And then he praises the four Kumāras, beautiful prayers, and then he asks, what was his question? He asked, "There is no need to ask of your welfare, for you are all Atmaramas, you're satisfied within yourself. And you make no... Therefore, I ask you well wishes, by what means will there be benefit for those suffering in this world?" And then, let me see. I don't want to read everything because I don't want to take too much time. But then Sanat-kumara, he appreciates Pṛthu's qualities and inquiries. And then verse 21, he gives answer to the question. The only cause of benefit for humans, of benefit for human society has been conclusively established in the scriptures as detachment from the bodily concept and attachment, rati, to the Lord. Attachment to the Lord and detachment from the body can be developed by having faith, being inquisitive about the process of bhakti, applying bhakti yoga in life, worshipping the Lord or the topmost yogi, regularly hearing and chanting the Lord's glories, not associating with persons simply interested in sense gratification and money, not associating with associates of materialists, and not accepting their goals, being disgusted with the taste for sense enjoyment, being satisfied in the self, molding one's life so one cannot live in peace without drinking the nectar of the Lord's qualities, being non-violent, following in the footsteps of great acharyas, remembering and tasting the sweetness of the excellent pastimes of the Lord, practicing yam, niyam without material desires, not criticizing others and their methods of religion, simple and plain living, tolerating dualities, constant hearing of the Lord's qualities, which are like ornaments on the ears, with increasing bhakti, develops one's detachment from matter and attachment to the Lord. I like how it ended with hearing. Constant hearing of the Lord's qualities, which are like ornaments on the ears, with increasing bhakti develops one's detachment from matter and attachment to the Lord. Okay, so that's what we read the day before yesterday. And then yesterday, we read, I'm just going to read everything. Result of attachment to the Lord. Such rati, by the grace of the Guru, awakens Gyan and Vairagya, and destroys the subtle body, just as fire arising from wood burns the wood itself. Note, Pancha Atmakam refers to either the 5 elements or the 5 coverings of contamination of the subtle body: ignorance, ego, attachment, hatred, and fear of death. Rag, dvesh, abhinivesh. What is it? Rag, dvesh. Oh my God, what's wrong with my brain? Avidya, asmita, rag, dvesh, abhinivesh? Yes, avidya, asmita, rag, desh, and abhinivesh. Result of destruction of the subtle body. This is the result of the destruction of the subtle body. One no longer sees external sense objects for one's own pleasure, internal disturbances like lamentation, etc. And one no longer sees obstacles in seeing Paramatma, which existed previously. This is similar to the awakening state in which one no longer sees the objects in a dream. Here is effects of the presence of the effects of the presence and absence of the subtle body. In the presence of the subtle body, one is subjected to various designations and sees oneself as an enjoyer due to desires, things of this world as objects of sense enjoyment, and the results of happiness and distress. But with the absence of the subtle body, one sees Paramatma. One tries to fulfill the Lord's desire, and one tries to fulfill the Lord's desires. And then verse 29, it says, with the presence of the subtle body, one sees differences in the bodies of oneself and others, just as one sees the reflection of a body appearing differently in water, oil, or a mirror. But with the absence of the subtle body, one does not see such differences. Attachment to sense gratification is the cause of saṁsāra. Sense gratification causes the destruction of the self. So one first thinks of sense gratification, and then the mind becomes agitated. Then the discriminating power of intelligence is lost. What's the footnote? Just as, the discriminating power of intelligence is lost, just as the water in a lake is sucked up by the big straws growing on its bank. Then memory is lost. And then when the memory is lost, then knowledge is destroyed. And and that's the greatest harm to the soul, when your knowledge is destroyed. That's the first of the coverings, avidya, then asmita, rag, desh, abhinivesh. Sense gratification leads to lower life forms. Constantly thinking of money and its use for sense gratification causes the destruction of all goals, which causes the loss of Gyan, of knowledge, and Vigyan, experience knowledge like realization, which causes entrance into immovable life forms. Be detached from things that obstruct the Purusharthas, the goals of human life. Those who desire to cross the ocean of nescience should never have attachment for things which completely obstruct dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. Moksha is the most important of the four Purusharthas. It's the most important of the four goals of human life, objectives of human life, and must be taken very seriously. Moksha is liberation. The other three are all subject to destruction by death. So moksha is the only eternal Purushartha. How are the other three goals subject to destruction? The Lord destroys all temporary goals. There is nothing auspicious for those whose goals will be destroyed by the Lord as time. Such temporary goals, higher, pare, or lower, avare, exist only in relation to the material modes. And that's what we read up to yesterday. So now we're going to read about Bhakti-miśra-jñāna. So that's Gyan, knowledge, mixed with Bhakti, and with a predominance of Gyan and the goal of Sayuja Mukti, merging in the Supreme. Okay, so I didn't. One second. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 22. Where is it? We're doing 37 to 47. All right, and we're finishing the chapter today. Tattva narendra jagatam atta tatusham cha tehendriyas dishanatmavirabritanam yakshetra vittapataya hridi vishvagavi pratyakchakasti bhagavangsthamavehi sosmi. Sanat-kumara advised the king, "Therefore, my dear King Pṛthu, try to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead who is living within everyone's heart, along with the individual soul, in each and every body, either moving or not moving. The individual souls are fully covered by the gross material body and subtle body made of the life, air, and intelligence." Purport by Srila Prabhupada. In this verse, it is specifically advised that instead of wasting time in the human form of life endeavoring for economic development and sense gratification, one should try to cultivate spiritual values by understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is existing with the individual soul within everyone's heart. The individual soul and the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his Paramatma feature are both sitting within this body, which is covered by gross and subtle elements. To understand this is to attain actual spiritual culture. There are two ways of advancing in spiritual culture: by the method of the impersonalist philosophers, and by the devotional service. And by devotional service. The impersonalist comes to the conclusion that he and the Supreme Spirit are one, whereas devotees, or personalists, realize the absolute truth by understanding that because the absolute truth is the supreme predominator and we living entities are predominated, our duty is to serve him. The Vedic injunctions say, "Tat tvam asi," you are the same, and so ham, I am the same. The impersonalist conception of these mantras is that the Supreme Lord, or the Absolute Truth, and the living entity are one. But from the devotee's point of view, these mantras assert that both the Supreme Lord and ourselves are of the same quality. Tat tvam asi ayam atma brahma. Both the Supreme Lord and the living entity are spirit. Understanding this is self-realization. The human form of life is meant for understanding the Supreme Lord and oneself by spiritual cultivation of knowledge. One should not waste valuable life simply engaged in economic development and sense gratification. In this verse, the word kshetravit is also important. The word is explained in Bhagavad-Gita 13.2, idang shariram kunteya kshetram ityabhidhiyate. This body is called kshetra, the field of activities, and the properties of the body, the individual soul, and the supersoul sitting within the body are both called kshetravit. But there is a difference between the two kinds of kshetravit. One kshetravit, or knower of the body, namely the Paramatma, or the supersoul, is directing the individual soul. When we rightly take the direction of the supersoul, our life becomes successful. He is directing from within and from without. From within, he is directing as Cetaguru, or the spiritual master sitting within the heart. Directions to the living entity so that he may finish up his material activities and come back home, back to Godhead. The presence of the Supreme Soul and the individual soul within the body can be perceived by anyone by the fact that as long as the individual soul and the supersoul are both living within the body is always shining and fresh. But as soon as the supersoul and the individual soul give up possession of the gross body, it immediately decomposes. One who is spiritually advanced can thus understand the real difference between a dead body and a living body. In conclusion, one should not waste his life by so-called economic development and sense gratification, but should cultivate spiritual knowledge to understand the supersoul and the individual soul and their relationship. In this way, by advancement of knowledge, one can achieve liberation and the ultimate goal of life. It is said that if one takes to the path of liberation, even rejecting his so-called duties in the material world, he is not a loser at all. But a person who does not take to the path of liberation, yet carefully executes economic development and sense gratification, loses everything. Narad's statement before Vyasadeva is appropriate in this connection. Takta sadharma charanam pujam harer pajam apakvota patet tato yadi yatra kvabhadram abhuramushakim ko varta apto bhajatam swadharmata. If a person, out of sentiment or some other reason, takes to the shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, and in due course of time does not succeed in coming to the ultimate goal of life, or falls down due to lack of experience, there is no loss. But for a person who does not take to devotional service, yet executes his material duties very nicely, there is no gain. It's an important shloka. Yasminidam sarasaratmataya vibhati maya viveka vidutis rajivahi buddhi tang nitya mukta parishuddha vishuddha tattvam pratyuddha karma kalila prakritim prapadye. The Supreme Personality of Godhead manifests himself as one with the cause and effect within this body. But one who has transcended the illusory energy by deliberate consideration, which clears the misconception of a snake for a rope, can understand that the Paramatma is eternally transcendental to the material creation and situated in pure internal energy. Thus the Lord is transcendental to all material contamination. Unto him only must one surrender. Purport. This verse is specifically stated to defy the Mayavad conclusion of oneness without differentiation between the individual soul and the supersoul. The Mayavad conclusion is that the living entity and the supersoul are one. There is no difference. The Mayavadis proclaim that there is no separate existence outside the impersonal Brahman, and that the feeling of separation is Maya, or an illusion, by which one considers a rope to be a snake. The rope and the snake argument is generally offered by the Mayavadi philosophers. Therefore, these words, which represent Vivartavad, are specifically mentioned herein. Actually, Paramatma, the Supersoul, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he is eternally liberated. In other words, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is living within this body along with the individual soul, and this is confirmed in the Vedas. They are likened to two friends sitting on the same tree. Yet Paramatma is above the illusory energy. The illusory energy is called Bahiranga Shakti, or external energy, and the living entity is called Tatashta Shakti, or the marginal potency. As stated in Bhagavad-Gita, the material energy represented as earth, water, air, fire, sky, etc., and the spiritual energy, the living entity, are both the energies of the Supreme Lord. Even though the energies and the energetic are identical, the living entity, individual soul, being prone to being influenced by the external energy, considers the Supreme Personality of Godhead to be one with himself. The word prapadye is also significant in this verse, for it refers to the conclusion of the Bhagavad-Gita 1866. Swadharma parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja. In another place, the Lord says, Bahunam janmanam ante gyanavam mam prapadyate. Bhagavad-Gita 7:19. This prapadye, or sharanam vraja, refers to the individual's surrender to the Supersoul. The individual soul, when surrendered, can understand that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, although situated within the heart of the individual, is superior to the individual soul. The Lord is always transcendental to the material manifestation, even though it appears that the Lord and the material manifestation are one and the same. According to the Vaishnava philosophy, he is one and different simultaneously. Achinta Bheda Bheda. The material energy is a manifestation of his external potency, and since the potency is identical with the potent, it appears that the Lord and the individual soul are one. But actually, the individual soul is under the influence of material energy, and the Lord is always transcendental to it. Unless the Lord is superior to the individual soul, there is no question of prapadde, or surrender unto him. This word prapadde refers to the process of devotional service. Simply by non-devotional speculation on the rope and the snake, one cannot approach the absolute truth. Therefore, devotional service is stressed as more important than deliberation on or mental speculation to understand the absolute truth. Yat pada pankaja palasha vilasa bhaktya karma shayam gratitamud udkratayanti santa tarvanarikta matayo yatayo pirudha sroto ganas tamat aranam bhajavasudevam. Sorry, let me clear my throat. Sorry. Okay. The devotees who are always engaged in the service of the toes of the lotus feet of the Lord can very easily overcome hard-knotted knots for fruitive activities. Did I say hard-knotted knots? Hard-knotted desires for fruitive activities. Let me reread this. The devotees who are always engaged in the service of the toes of the lotus feet of the Lord can very easily overcome hard-knotted desires for fruitive activities. Because this is very difficult, the non-devotees, the Gyanis and the Yogis, although trying to stop the waves of sense gratification, cannot do so. Therefore, you are advised to engage in the devotional service of Krishna, the son of Vasudeva. Purport. There are three kinds of transcendentalists trying to overcome the influence of the modes of material nature: the Gyanis, Yogis, and Bhaktas. All of them attempt to overcome the influence of the senses, which is compared to the incessant waves of a river. The waves of a river flow incessantly, and it is very difficult to stop them. Similarly, the waves of the desire for material enjoyment are so strong that they cannot be stopped by any process other than bhakti yoga. The bhaktas, by their transcendental devotional service unto the lotus feet of the Lord, become so overwhelmed with transcendental bliss that automatically their desires for material enjoyment stop. The Gyanis and Yogis who are not attached to the lotus feet of the Lord simply struggle against the waves of desire. They are described in this verse as rikta mataya, which means devoid of devotional service. In other words, the Gyanis and Yogis, although trying to be free from the desires of material activities, actually become more and more entangled in false philosophical speculation or strenuous attempts to stop the activities of the senses. As stated previously, Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janayatya Shuvairagyam Gyanam Cha Yadahaitukam. Here also the same point is stressed. Bhaja Vasudevam indicates that one who is engaged in the loving service of Krishna, the son of Vasudeva, can very easily stop the waves of desires. As long as one continues to try to artificially stop the waves of desires, he will certainly be defeated. That is indicated in this verse. Desires for fruitive activities are strongly rooted, but the trees of desire can be uprooted completely by devotional service, because devotional service employs superior desire. One can give up inferior desires when engaged in superior desires. To try to stop desires is impossible. One has to desire the Supreme in order to not be entangled in inferior desires. Gyanis maintain a desire to become one with the Supreme, but such desire is also considered to be calm, lust. Similarly, the Yogis desire mystic power, and that is also calm. And the Bhaktas, not being desirous of any sort of material enjoyment, be purified. There is no artificial attempt to stop desire. Desire becomes a source of spiritual enjoyment under the protection of the toes of the lotus feet of the Lord. It is stated herein by the Kumāras that the lotus feet of Lord Krishna are the ultimate reservoir of all pleasure. One should therefore take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, instead of trying to unsuccessfully stop desires for material enjoyment. As long as one is unable to stop the desire for material enjoyment, there is no possibility of becoming liberated from the entanglement of material existence. It may be argued that the waves of a river are incessantly flowing, and they cannot be stopped. The waves of the river flow toward the sea. When the tide comes over the river, it overwhelms the flowing of the river, and the river itself becomes overflooded, and the waves from the sea become more prominent than the waves from the river. Similarly, a devotee with intelligence plans so many things for the service of the Lord in Krishna consciousness that stagnant material desires become overflooded by the desire to serve the Lord. Wow, that's beautiful. Beautiful comparison. As confirmed by Yamunacharya, since he has been engaged in the service of the lotus feet of the Lord, there is always a current of newer and newer desires flowing to serve the Lord, so much so that the stagnant desire of sex life becomes very insignificant. Yamunacharya even says that he spits on such desires. Bhagavad-Gita 2.59 also confirms, Parang dvishtra nivartate. The conclusion is that by developing a loving desire for the service of the lotus feet of the Lord, we subdue all material desires for sense gratification. Krichro mahan iha bhavarnavam aplavesham Shadvarganakrama sukena titir-shanti Tattvam harir bhagavata bhajani amangrim Kritva dupam vyasanam uttaradustararnam. The ocean of nescience is very difficult to cross because it is infested with many dangerous sharks. Although those who are non-devotees undergo severe austerities and penances to cross that ocean, we recommend that you simply take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, which are like boats for crossing the ocean. Although the ocean is difficult to cross, by taking shelter of his lotus feet, you will overcome all dangers. Purport. Material existence compared herein to the great ocean of nescience. Another name of this ocean is Vaitarani. In that Vaitarani ocean, which is the causal ocean, there are innumerable universes floating like footballs. On the other side of the ocean is the spiritual world of Vaikuntha, which is described in Bhagavad-Gita 8.20 as Paras Tasmat tu Bhavo-nya. Thus, there is an ever-existing spiritual nature which is beyond this material nature. Even though all the material universes are annihilated again and again in the causal ocean, the Vaikuntha planets, which are spiritual, even though all the material universes are annihilated again and again in the causal ocean, the Vaikuntha planets, which are spiritual, exist eternally and are not subject to dissolution. The human form of life gives the living entity a chance to cross the ocean of nescience, which is this material universe, and enter into the spiritual sky. Although there are many methods or boats by which one can cross the ocean, the Kumāras recommends that the king take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, just as one would take shelter of a good boat. Non-devotees who do not take shelter of the Lord's lotus feet try to cross the ocean of nescience by other methods, karma, gyan, and yoga, but they have a great deal of trouble. Indeed, sometimes they become so busy simply enjoying their troubles that they never cross the ocean. There is no guarantee that the non-devotees will cross the ocean, but even though they manage to cross, they have to undergo severe austerities and penances. On the other hand, anyone who takes to the process of devotional service and has faith that the lotus feet of the Lord are safe boats to cross that ocean is certainly to cross very easily and comfortably. Pṛthu Mahārāja is therefore advised to take the boat to the lotus feet of the Lord to easily cross over all dangers. Dangerous elements in the universe are compared to sharks in the ocean. Even though one may be a very expert swimmer, he cannot possibly survive if he is attacked by sharks. One often sees that so many so-called swamis and yogis sometimes advertise themselves as competent to cross the ocean of nescience and to help others to cross. But in actuality, they are found to be simply victims of their own senses. Instead of helping their followers to cross the ocean of nescience, such swamis and yogis fall prey to Maya, represented by the fair sex, women, and are thus devoured by the sharks in that ocean. Maitreya uvacha sa evam brahmaputrena kumarinatma medhasa tarshitatma gati samyak prashayo vachatang nripa. The great sage Maitreya continued, being thus enlightened in complete spiritual knowledge by the son of Brahma, one of the Kumāras who is complete in spiritual knowledge, let me reread that. Being thus enlightened in complete spiritual knowledge by the son of Brahma, one of the Kumāras who is complete in spiritual knowledge, the king worshipped them in the following words. And I think that one son was Sanat-kumara, right? Purport. In this verse, the word Atma Medasa is commented upon by Shripad Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, who says that Atmani means unto Lord Krishna, Paramatmani. Lord Krishna is Paramatma, Ishvara Paramakrishna, Brahma-samhita 5.1. Therefore, one whose mind is acting fully in Krishna consciousness is called Atma Medha. This may be contrasted to the word Grihamedi, which refers to one whose brain is always engrossed with thoughts of material activities. The Atma Medha is always thinking of Krishna's activities in Krishna consciousness. Since Sanat-kumara, who was a son of Lord Brahma, was fully Krishna conscious, he could point out the path of spiritual advancement. The word Atmagati refers to that path of activities by which one can make progress in understanding Krishna. 42. Rajovacha krito menu graha purvam harinarta nukampina tamapadyatum brahman bhagavan yuyamagata. The king said, O Brahman, O powerful one, formerly Lord Vishnu showed me his causeless mercy, indicating that you would come to my house, and to confirm that blessing, you have all come. Wait, who's speaking now? Oh yeah, of course, Pṛthu Mahārāja, okay. Sorry, I spaced out for a second. Purport. When Lord Vishnu appeared in the great arena of sacrifice at the time when King Pṛthu was performing a great sacrifice, Ashwamedha, he predicted that the Kumāras would very soon come and advise the king. Therefore, Pṛthu Mahārāja remembered the causeless mercy of the Lord and thus welcomed the arrival of the Kumāras, who were fulfilling the Lord's prediction. In other words, when the Lord makes a prediction, he fulfills that prediction through some of his devotees. Similarly, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu predicted that both his glorious names and the Hare Krishna Mahamantra would be broadcast in all the towns and villages of the world. Srila Bhakti-Vinod Thakur and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada desired to fulfill this great prediction, and we are following in their footsteps. Regarding his devotees, Lord Krishna told Arjuna, Konteya pratijanihi name bhakta pranashyati. O son of Kunti, declare it boldly that my devotee will never perish. Bhagavad-Gita 9:31. The point is that the Lord himself could declare such things, but it was when his desire to make the declaration through Arjuna, and thus doubly assure that his pastimes... The point is that the Lord could declare such things, but it was his desire to make the declaration through Arjuna, and thus doubly assure that his promise would never be broken. The Lord himself promises, and his confidential devotees executes the promise. The Lord makes so many promises for the benefit of suffering humanity. Although the Lord is very compassionate upon suffering humanity, human beings are generally not very anxious to serve him. The relationship is something like that between the father and the son. The father is always anxious for the welfare of the son, even though the son forgets or neglects the father. The word anukampina is significant. The Lord is so compassionate upon the living entities that he comes himself into this world in order to benefit the fallen souls. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyuttanam adharmasya tadatmanam sujamyaham. Whenever and wherever there is a decline in religious practice, O descendant of Bharata, and a predominant rise of irreligion, at that time I descend myself. Bhagavad-Gita 4:7. Thus, it is out of compassion that the Lord appears in his different forms. Lord Shri Krishna appeared on this planet out of compassion for fallen souls. Lord Buddha appeared out of compassion for the poor animals who were being killed by the demons. Lord Nrsimhadev appeared out of compassion for Pṛthu Mahārāja. The conclusion is that the Lord is so compassionate upon the fallen souls within this material world that he comes himself or sends his devotees and his servants to fulfill his desire to have all the fallen souls come back home, back to Godhead. Thus, Lord Shri Krishna instructed Bhagavad-Gita to Arjuna for the benefit of the entire human society. Intelligent men should therefore seriously consider this Krishna consciousness movement and fully utilize the instructions of Bhagavad-Gita as preached without adulteration by his pure devotees. Nishpaditas chakartsneyena Bhagavad-bir Bhagavad-bir-grinalubi sadhu chishtam hime sarvam atmana sahakim dade. My dear Brahman, you have carried out the order thoroughly because you are also as compassionate as the Lord. It is my duty, therefore, to offer you something. But all I possess are but remnants of food taken by great saintly persons. What shall I give? Purport. The word sadhuchishtam is significant in this verse. Pṛthu Mahārāja got his kingdom from great saintly persons like Bhrigu and others, just as one gets remnants of food. After the death of King Vain, the whole world was bereft of a popular ruler. There were so many catastrophes occurring that the great saintly persons headed by Bhrigu created the body of King Pṛthu out of the body of his dead father, King Vain. Since King Pṛthu was thus offered the kingdom by the virtue of the mercy of great saintly persons, he did not want to divide his kingdom among saints like the Kumāras. When a father is eating food, he may, out of compassion, offer the remnants of his food to his son. Although such food may already be chewed by the father, it cannot be offered to the father again. Pṛthu Mahārāja's position was something like this. Whatever he possessed had already been chewed, and therefore he could not offer it to the Kumāras. Indirectly, however, he offered everything he possessed to the Kumāras, and consequently, they utilized his possessions in whatever way they liked. The next verse clarifies this matter. Pranadhara sutta brahman grihascha saparichadha rajambala mahikosha iti sarvam niveditam. The king continued, Therefore, my dear Brahmins, my life, wife, children, home, furniture, and household paraphernalia, my kingdom, strength, land, and especially my treasury, are all offered unto you. Purport. In some readings, the word dhara is not, but the word used then, the word used then is raya, which means wealth. In India, there are still wealthy persons who are recognized by the state as raya. A great devotee of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was called Ramananda Rai because he was governor of Madras and very rich. There are still many holders of the title Raya. Rai Bahudar, Rai chaudhary, and so on. The dara, or wife, is not permitted to be offered to the Brahmins. Everything is offered to worthy persons who are able to accept charity, but nowhere is it found that one offers his wife. Therefore, in this case, the reading raya is more accurate than tara. Okay. Sorry. Also, since Pṛthu Mahārāja offered everything to the Kumāras, the word kosha, treasury, need not be separately mentioned. Kings and emperors used to keep a private treasury which was known as a Ratna-bhanda. The Ratna-bhanda was a special treasury room which contained special jewelries such as bangles, necklaces, and so on, which were presented to the king by the citizens. This jewelry was kept separate from the regular treasury house where all the collected revenues were kept. Thus, Pṛthu Mahārāja offered his stock of private jewelry to the lotus feet of the Kumāras. It has already been admitted that all the king's property belonged to the Brahmins, and that Pṛthu Mahārāja was simply using it for the welfare of the state. If it were actually the property of the Brahmins, how could it be offered again to them? In this regard, Śrīpad Sridhar Swami has explained that this offering is just like the servant's offering of food to his master. The food already belongs to the master, for the master has purchased it, but the servant, by preparing food, makes it acceptable to the master and thus offers it to him. In this way, everything belonging to Pṛthu Mahārāja was offered to the Kumāras. Sainapatyam cha rajyam cha dandanetritvam cha sarvalokadipatyam cha veda shastra virarhati. Since only a person who is completely educated according to the principles of Vedic knowledge deserves to be commander-in-chief, ruler of the state, the first to chastise and the proprietor of the whole planet, Pṛthu Mahārāja, offered everything to the Kumāras. Can I reread this? Sorry. Since only a person who is completely educated according to the principles of knowledge deserves to be the commander-in-chief, the ruler of the state, the first to chastise, and the proprietor of the whole planet, Pṛthu Mahārāja offered everything to the Kumāras. Purport. In this verse it is very clearly stated that a kingdom, state, or empire must be governed under the instructions of saintly persons and Brahmins like the Kumāras. When monarchy ruled throughout the world, the monarch was actually directed by a board of Brahmins and saintly persons. The king, as the administrator of the state, executed his duties as a servant of the Brahmins. It was not that the kings or Brahmins were dictators, nor did they consider themselves proprietors of the state. The kings were also well versed in Vedic literatures, and thus were familiar with the injunction of Sri Ishupanishad. Ishashvasyam idam sarvam. Everything that exists belongs to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In Bhagavad-Gita, Lord Krishna also claims that he is the proprietor of all planetary systems, Sarva Loka Maheshwaram. Since this is the case, no one can claim to be the proprietor of the state. The king, president, or head of the state should always remember that he is not the proprietor, but the servant. In the present age, the king or president forgets that he is the servant of God and thinks of himself as a servant of the people. The present democratic government is proclaimed to be a people's government, a government by the people and for the people. But this type of government is not sanctioned by the Vedas. The Vedas maintain that a kingdom should be governed for the purpose of satisfying the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and should therefore be ruled by a representative of the Lord. The head of a state should not be appointed if he is bereft of all Vedic knowledge. In this verse, it is clearly stated, Veda Shastra Virarhati, that all high government posts are especially meant for persons who are well conversant with the teachings of the Vedas. In the Vedas, there are definite instructions defining how a king, commander-in-chief, soldier, and citizen should behave. Unfortunately, there are many so-called philosophers in the present age who give instruction without citing authority, and many leaders follow their unauthorized instruction. Consequently, people are not happy. The modern theory of dialectical communism, set forth by Karl Marx and followed by communist governments, is not perfect. According to Vedic communism, no one in the state should ever starve. Presently, there are many bogus institutions which are collecting funds from the public for the purpose of giving food to starving people, but these funds are invariably misused. According to the Vedic instructions, the government should arrange things in such a way that there will be no question of starvation. In the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, it is stated that a householder must see to it that even a lizard or a snake does not starve. They also must be given food. In actuality, however, there is no question of starvation because everything is the property of the Supreme Lord, and He sees to it that there is ample arrangement for feeding everyone. In the Vedas, Katha Upanishad 2.2.13, it is said, Eko bahunam yo vidadhati kaman. The Lord supplies the necessities of life to everyone, and there is no question of starvation. If anyone starves, it is due to the mismanagement of the so-called ruler, governor, or president. It is clear, therefore, that a person who is not well versed in the Vedic injunctions, Veda Shastravit, should not run for election as president, governor, etc. Formerly, kings were rajarshis, which meant that although they were serving as kings, they were as good as saintly persons because they would not transgress any of the injunctions of the Vedic scriptures and would rule under the direction of great saintly persons and Brahmins. According to this arrangement, modern presidents, governors, and chief executive officers are all unworthy of their posts because they are not conversant with Vedic administrative knowledge and they do not take direction from great saintly persons and Brahmins. Because of his disobedience to the orders of the Vedas and the Brahmins, King Vena, Pṛthu Mahārāja's father, was killed by the Brahmins. Pṛthu Mahārāja therefore knew very well that it behooved him to rule the planet as the servant of saintly persons and Brahmins. Sameva brahmano bhunkte svam vaste svam dadati cha tasyayvanu grahenanam bhunjate kshatriya daya. How many verses are there? I think this might be the last one. Oh, okay, 2 more verses. Oh, 3 more verses. What? Oh, I guess we're not finishing the chapter today. Sorry, that was my bad. Okay. The Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Sudras eat their food by virtue of the Brahman's mercy. It is the Brahmins who enjoy their own property, clothe themselves with their own property, and give charity with their own property. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is worshipped with the words Namo Brahmana Devaya, which indicates that the Supreme Lord accepts the Brahmins as worshipable gods. The Supreme Lord is worshipped by everyone, yet to teach others, he worships the Brahmins. Everyone should follow the instructions of the Brahmins, for their only business is to spread Shabda Brahma, or Vedic knowledge, all over the world. Whenever there is a scarcity of Brahmins to spread Vedic knowledge, chaos throughout human society results. Since Brahmins and Vaishnavas are direct servants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they do not depend on others. In actuality, everything in the world belongs to the Brahmins, and out of their humility, the Brahmins accept charity from the Kshatriyas, or kings, and the Vaishyas, or merchants. Everything belongs to the Brahmins, but the Kshatriya government and the mercantile people keep everything in custody, like bankers, and whenever the Brahmins need money, the Kshatriyas and Vaishyas should supply it. It is like a savings account with money which the depositor can withdraw out at his will. The Brahmins, being engaged in the service of the Lord, have very little time to handle the finances of the world, and therefore the riches are kept by the Kshatriyas, or the kings, who are to produce money upon the Brahmins' demand. Actually, the Brahmins or Vaishnavas do not live at others' costs. They live by spending their own money, although it appears that they are collecting this money from others. Kshatriyas and Vaishyas have no right to give charity, for whatever they possess belongs to the Brahmins. Therefore, charity should be given by the Kshatriyas and Vaishyas under the instructions of the Brahmins. Unfortunately, at the present moment, there is a scarcity of Brahmins, and since the so-called Kshatriyas and Vaishyas do not carry out the orders of the Brahmins, the world is in a chaotic condition. The second line of this verse indicates that the Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Sudras eat only by virtue of the Brahmins' mercy. In other words, they should not eat anything which is forbidden by the Brahmins. The Brahmins and Vaishnavas know what to eat, and by their personal example, they do not eat anything which is not offered first to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They eat only prasad, or remnants of the food offered to the Lord. The Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Sudras should eat only Krishna prasad, which is afforded them by the mercy of the Brahmins. They cannot open slaughterhouses and eat meat, fish, or eggs, or drink liquor, or earn money for this purpose without authorization. In the present age, because society is not guided by Brahminical instruction, the whole population is only absorbed in sinful activities. Consequently, everyone is deservedly being punished by the laws of nature. This is a situation in this age of Kali. Is it 8 o'clock? I just turned 8. Do you mind if I just do this one last verse? So it'll just be like a few minutes over time. Otherwise, it will mess up the next days of our reading, I think. Yaradrishi Bhagavato Gatiratmavada Ekantato Nigamibhi Pratipaditana Dushyantva Dabra Karuna Swakritena Nityam Ko Nama Tat Pratikaroti Vinodapatram. Pṛthu Mahārāja continued, how can such persons who have rendered unlimited service by explaining the path of self-realization in relation to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and whose explanations are given for our enlightenment with complete conviction and Vedic evidence, be repaid except by folded palms containing water for their satisfaction? Such great personalities can be satisfied only by their own activities, which are distributed amongst human society out of their unlimited mercy. Let me just check one thing. 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 54. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Purport. Great personalities of the material world are very eager to render welfare service to human society. But actually, no one can render better service than one who distributes the knowledge of spiritual realization in relation with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. All living entities are within the clutches of the illusory energy. Forgetting their real identity, they hover in material existence, transmigrating from one body to another in the search of a peaceful life. These living entities have very little knowledge of self-realization. They are not getting any relief, although they are very anxious to attain peace of mind and some substantial happiness. Saintly persons like the Kumāras, Narad, Prahlad, Janak, Shukadev Goswami, and Kapiladev, as well as the followers of such authorities as the Vaishnavacharyas and their servants, can render a valuable service to humanity by disseminating knowledge of the relationship between the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entity. Such knowledge is the perfect benediction for humanity. Knowledge of Krishna is such a great gift that it is impossible to repay the benefactor. Therefore, Pṛthu Mahārāja requested the Kumāras to be satisfied by their own benevolent activities in delivering faultless souls from the clutches of Maya. The king saw that there was no other way to satisfy them for their exalted activities. The word Vinodapatram can be divided into two words, Vina and Udapatram, or can be understood as one word, Vinodapatram, which means joker. A joker's activities simply arouse laughter. And a person who tries to repay the spiritual master or teacher of the transcendental message of Krishna becomes a laughingstock, just like a joker, because it is not possible to repay such a debt. The best friend and benefactor of all people is one who awakens humanity to its original Krishna consciousness. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol. I like that. One who tries to repay Srila Gurudev is just like a joker, because he becomes a laughingstock at trying to repay something that's, there's no chance of repaying. Jai Shishi Guru Gauranga Gandharvika Giridhari Shishi Radha Vinod Vihari Ju Ki Jai. Shri Govinda Gopinath Maran Mohan Ju Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtatarashatashmad Srila Bhakti-miśra-jñāna Narayan Goswami Maharaj Srila Gurudev Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtatarashatashmad Srila Bhakti-miśra-jñāna Vaman Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtatarashatashmad Srila Bhakti-miśra-jñāna Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtatarashatashmad Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtatarashatashmad Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishta Mahā-Bhagavat Srila Goksharas Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishta Srila Satchidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishta Vaishnav Sarvabhauma Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Rupanu Gauriya Guru Varga Ki Jai. Shri Rup Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath. Shri Jeev Gopal Bhattadash Raghunath Shar Gosai Prabhu Ki Jai. Shri Sarup Damodar Rai Ramanandari Shri Gaur Parshada Vrinda Ki Jai. Namachay Shri Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Kshetra Mandal Gaur Mandal Vraja Mandal Mathura Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Sarva Abhishta Pradata Giriraj Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Radha Kund Shama Kund Ki Jai. Shri Muna Devi Ganga Devi Ki Jai. Shri Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. Shri Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Shri Purnamasi Yogamaaya Ki Jai. Shri Gopeshwar Mahadev Ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Shri Nityananda Shakti Janava Devi Ki Jai. Shri today's Sita's appearance day. Is it Advaita Acharya's wife Sita, or is it Ramachandra's wife Sita? One second. Okay, it is Ramachandra's wife Sita. Jai Shri Sita, Ram Shakti Sita Devi Ki Jai. Shri Nityananda Shakti Janava Devi Ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Madhu Pandit Ki Jai. Tadiya Shubha Tirubhav Titi Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Samagata Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bo. Vrindai Tulsi Devai Priyai Keshavashacha Krishna Bhakti Pradadevi Sattvatai Namo Namaha. Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Dandavat pranams. What am I saying? The reason why I ended so late today is because I started 4 minutes late. I've been really good at being on time, but today I happened to be 4 minutes late. And today's reading was extra long. We read 6,200 words. But tomorrow, we only have to read 5,500 words. So we'll finish early tomorrow. And I'll be on time. Today was just, I don't know. All right, Haribol. Dandavat pranams.